Peace, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ibrahim Tanner TV. Just sat in the room, making sure everything is straight before we start this show. Really important show tonight. I've been hearing a lot of crazy stuff online. It seems like the Supreme Court decision killed race-based affirmative action. And that kind of came to a screeching halt. And then slowly but surely, some other language came up, this race conscience. So we got to get into race conscience, what race consciousness is. And is that a better solution than what the American Freedmen status-based policy is when it comes to doing reparations? So I went to Google because before this week, and this term just blew up on social media for me. I don't know about you guys' algorithm, but for some reason, I just been hearing race conscious, race conscious, race conscious. And I went into a space and I was hearing people talk about why we should be race conscious and do race-based things and why we should want the Supreme Court to use strict scrutiny against reparations. And I'm thinking, like, what are these people talking about, man? And it made me think of one person when I heard this. There was this character off a sitcom called Oswald.
First of all, we must internalize the flatulation of the matter by transmitting the effervescence of the Indonesian proximity in order to further segregate the crux of my venereal infection. Now, if I may retain my liquids here for one moment, I'd like to continue the redundance of my quote-unquote intestinal tract, see, because to preclude on the issue of world domination would only circumsize the revelation.
All right, I'm sorry, y'all, but that's Oswald Bates, and that's the character that you would get on The Living Color. He would just come in, he would just say anything. He was a prison guy who had not even learned a bunch of words, but to himself, he had learned a bunch of words, and he just spewed a bunch of nonsense. And this is what I was hearing when I was in these spaces, and I'm gonna play a clip from one of these spaces so you can understand what I'm talking about. People was just jumbling things together. Now, a few days ago, Naheem and Ali from BTP, they did a space. They did a space on the status of American Freedmen, why American Freedmen is it fits, the criteria for what the Constitution is looking at when policy needs to be passed. And they did an excellent job. You guys can go back and check that space. This right here is basically a part 2 to that space. I'm just camelbacking off of that to just add a little bit more context to you, but also show the other side of what happens when you don't use status-based. Now, I went to Google and I picked up a quick definition of what race-conscious policy is. And it says race-conscious policy is a policy that aims to improve the conditions of racial minority. In the United States, such policies are typically aimed at, and it talks about they're aimed at eliminating racism in the system. The problem is, race came later. And if you listen to Naheem and Ali them space, they break that down very well. That this idea of race came after slavery. It came later. So the idea that you're going to use race to alleviate harms that precluded race is just asinine, especially when race is more of a broad term. Just being honest, I don't see no difference between race-based and race-conscious because it all aims to serve the same goal, and that's to eliminate racism. That's not what the American Freedmen Reparations claim is about. Now, so I'll get into, Freedmen just real quick, right? Just so people can understand, because a lot of times when we say Freedmen, I think people think that we don't include people that may be a part of a hashtag movement, people that may be considering themselves to be Black or Pan-Africanist or however you want to identify yourself, but that's not true. We don't use the status as American freedmen to replace some other term that you may have some type of affinity to, that you may have been using for, all your life, or something that you may have just been conscious with recently. Actually, we use it to buttress and go along with whatever you may be using, except for one thing, right? You can't be an American freedman and a Indian or a pretendian, or however them people online do it. Like, that's the only thing that it would make null and void. If somehow you consider yourself a Native American, then you couldn't be an American freeman and a Native American. But other than that, like, you could be ADOS, you could be SBA, you can consider yourself to be Pan-Africanist, you can consider yourself to be Black, so forth and so on. It doesn't replace your race. It's the work that we do at BTP and USA DOF is not race work. And we're not trying to replace race. You still have your race. We're just trying to steep the reparations claim in something that's status-based, something that's constitutional. So I just want to bring up, I took a few excerpts out of the affirmative action case. I was looking at some articles, and something that we all know, if you watch my channel or you watch BTP or any of the people that BTP is affiliated with, you will already know that before affirmative action was basically killed a few months back by the conservative Supreme Court justices, that it was already not benefiting what LBJ intended it to do. White women benefited first and foremost, and they benefited the most, overwhelmingly. And then second, it was Black immigrants. So people who was non-freedmen, right? And then we kind of got those benefits that came trickling down. So I took a couple of excerpts out of the Supreme Court decision for Students for Fair Administration when they sued North Carolina and Harvard. And I just want to read a couple of things to you that kind of solidify us being on the right path. So the first excerpts I came from, and it was like over 200 pages. So I just took a few excerpts out that my brother Ali had highlighted, right? And these were Justice Thomas opinions, some of his oral arguments that came out of the affirmative action decision. And one thing he said was that the government can plainly remedy a race-based injury that it has inflicted, though such remedies must be meant to further a colorblind government, not perpetuate racial consciousness. So, when you think of somebody that's going to put forth a racial conscious claim, when a Supreme Court justice that overturned affirmative action said it cannot, the ends can't end up perpetuating racial consciousness, is just asinine. I don't know if people read this thing, but if you haven't, I think, you should go and read it, right? Thomas was breaking down Justice Sotomayor's dissent, and he argues that several of these statuses evident ratifiers, understanding that the Equal Protection Clause permits consideration of race to achieve its goal. This was Sotomayor saying, but Thomas said, upon examination, however, it is clear that these statutes are fully consistent with the colorblind view. Start with the 1865 Freedmen's Bureau Act. That act established the Freedmen's Bureau to issue provisions, clothing, and fuel needful for the immediate and temporary shelter and supply of destitute and suffering refugees and freedmen and their wives and children. So they're making this distinction that it wasn't race-based, it was actually status-based. And the status that these policies was enacted, the 1865 Freedmen's Bureau Act being one, was that it wasn't race-based, it was status-based. And that's why they were constitutional. And that's why they're still upheld to this day. Importantly, however, the acts apply to freedmen and refugees, a firmly race-neutral category, not blacks writ large. And because not all blacks in the United States were former slaves, freedmen was a decidedly under-inclusive proxy for race. So freedmen fit that, right? It wasn't race, it was race neutral. There was a law passed in DC that came under some scrutiny, and basically they were giving out funds for freedmen or destitute colored people in the District of Columbia area. However, when a prior version of this law targeting only blacks was criticized for being racially discriminatory, it was defended on the grounds that there were various places in the city where a former slave lived in densely populated shantytown, right? And this all comes out of the dissent on this. This was page 65, 66, and 67. All right. And then on page 113, part of Gorsuch's dissent, he said, Black or African American covers everyone from a descendant of enslaved persons who grew up poor in the rural South to a first generation child of a wealthy Nigerian immigrant to a Black identifying applicant with multiracial ancestries whose family live in the typical American suburb. That's really important. And we're going to come back to this Black identifying because there is a prominent figure in this reparations space that has a criteria that one considers race conscious, and they're saying it's constitutional. We're saying it's unconstitutional, but they're saying, no, this thing is constitutional and you can use this thing because somehow it opened up the threshold for all these other avenues to get to reparation. All right. So that's that. And I just wanted to, speak on just a couple of pieces of that so people can understand why, we are saying American Freedmen, we're not just making this thing up and we're not using it to somehow replace race. We're using it as just status, right? So I don't want anybody to get offended if they consider themselves to be something else. We got people that consider themselves to be Negro. We got people that consider themselves to be Black. We got people that consider themselves to be African American. We got people that consider themselves to be FBA, ADOS. The list goes on and on and on. And we're not here to challenge that or try to replace that. We're just saying when it comes to constitutional law and trying to get reparations passed, you have to use a status, and we already have a status. There was a time, I'm going to pull this article. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to summarize it. But I'm going to put this article up because it's kind of important also to lock in why freedmen. But, so let me see. Where is this? Because I just need people to kind of understand before we get into these cases. About why we use some of the language that we use. Okay, here we go. So here's a picture. They talk about the forgotten, the contraband of America and the road to freedom. So the big picture on the Civil War is that, Abraham Lincoln had a big picture of why he was fighting the Civil War. He wanted to restore the Union and make it strong and powerful. And Jefferson Davis wanted to keep the Confederacy strong. And he knew that, in the North, there was a lot of abolitionist rhetoric coming about. And if somehow they folded up under the Union soon, the power that they held through harvesting slaves and the institution of slavery in the South will soon be taken away from them. So while you got one person that's fighting to save the Union, you got another, I guess you would call him, he was the president of the Confederacy. He was fighting to keep the South intact. And the way they was going to keep the South intact was to keep slavery intact and to preserve slavery. The Confederate states that's fighting, and they're just fighting for the $14 a day. They're just fighting because they were drafted or they have, Confederate pride. And you got people in the North, they're fighting for their $14 a week, and they're fighting because they were drafted or they're new Americans who just came over here, and that was a dignified way for them to earn a living at the time. One of the only ways to earn a living because America was it was going through a civil war at the time. So you get these people, American freedmen, who are at the time working for the Confederate armies, and they're digging ditches, they're building trenches, they're building makeshift knives and different type of weaponries for the Confederate Army, but they understand that if we escape, now would be the best time for us to flee towards the Union Army and we can become free. And so many people did that they just ended up in what we now are known as contraband camps. So they ended up in these contraband camps. And when they got to these contraband camps, the superintendent of the contraband camp was asking, they were calling the Abraham Lincoln, President Lincoln at the time, and they're asking him, like, what do we do with all of these people that keep showing up in these contraband camps? And he's telling them that, he's trying to persuade public opinion. So he's telling them that, these people come to these camps when we're fighting against the Confederate Army, you can take their contraband to make their army weaker. Consider these people to be contraband. So the people kept coming, they kept coming, because you got to understand that Union forces was racist as well. So Union is trying to persuade their public opinion and keep their morale up so they'll continue to fight. And then eventually he just lets them know that, anybody who comes to these camps, these people are now free, right? Because
Ibrahim, hold on 1 second. What was the status of the people that were in contraband camps?
So the status of the people that were in contraband camps, and this is why you get those 2 acts from Congress. The status of those people became freedmen, and that's what he's telling them. See,
hold up. At the time when they were contraband, the status was refugee. So I wanted to make that point. It was refugee, and then later they became freedmen. So when you see the Bureau of Freedmen, Abandoned Lands, and Refugees, they try to make the point, well, the refugees was the white folks, but that's not completely true. At the time, you had freedmen, you had refugees, and some of those refugees were the people who were contrabands, who had the refugee status. I just wanted to add that point. So when you hear the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, that's the refugees weren't all white.
Mm-hmm. So at the time, you get these refugees, you get these people that are considered to be contraband and that are considered to be not prisoners of war, but think of it like booty of war, right? Like they were the precious commodity that the South were using to be able to sustain and maintain their military strength. So Congress passed 2 confiscation acts, and that's what actually eliminates slavery. This is before the Emancipation Proclamation. Once the Emancipation Proclamation came, it's basically saying there are no more slaves, right? So y'all don't even have to think twice if y'all see these people, whether they refugees or not. From this day on, they are now freedmen. So this is where the status comes from, and that's why it was important that we kind of dove into this, right? This stuff is about status, and this stuff has been going on for a long time. So when you see in the Supreme Court, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Justice Thomas talk about this stuff, this isn't some history that they're reviving or just bringing up. This stuff has always been here, and it has meaning. And just like you would consider the First Amendment or the Second Amendment when somebody's using that, you wouldn't say these people are revitalizing. No, it's always been here. It's it is the founding document. It's the foundation of American law, right? It's the American Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. So there's a few cases I'm gonna bring up, right? The first case, let me take this off the screen. Okay. The first case is this case dealing with Native Americans and the adoption of Native American children. This was a Times question. Okay, here we go. Let me take some of this stuff off the screen. All right, so Supreme Court uphold Native American adoption law. I won't read this, but I'll kind of summarize it. Y'all can jump in if y'all want to. But the Supreme Court on Thursday upheld a 1978 law aimed at keeping Native American adoptees with their tribes and traditions, heading a victory to tribes that had argued that a blow to the law will upend the basic principles that have allowed them to govern themselves for years. So the people that was against the law, and it was two of them. I know Thomas was one of them, and Alito was the other dissenting view. But they were basically saying that, you know, the Native Americans was using their status was not only a status, but it was race, right? And if they could get it to be race, then it would be unconstitutional. And the Native Americans was saying, like, no, like our status, our Native American status, our tribal status, that's a status. It doesn't have anything to do with race. So we're advocating for, you know, people who come from our tribes, who come from, you know, our reservations, or was born here, or, you know, have some type of ties to our tribe, that us as a tribe, we get first dibs on those kids. There was some kids, they didn't get a kid's name. They gave them like some letters, but they was adopted by a white family. And then the lady had another baby, and then they wanted that child to be also raised with the surrogate family that had took in the first Native Americans child, and the Native Americans fought back, and they end up winning that case. They won that case because they was using the fact that, you know, no, we're not Native American is not race, right? So this whole thing was being fought over, is this about race or is this about status? And eventually the Supreme Court ended up accepting that, yeah, this is not about race. This is just status. This is just status. So they upheld their ability to be able to adopt their kids first, right? So that was the first one. That was race versus status. That was dealing with the Native Americans, right? And once again, it's a New York Times article. It's titled "The Supreme Court Upholds Native Americans." State 62 million relief fund for Black Oregonians suspends what the heck keeps happening? Suspends operation, hands over remaining money to federal court. And I believe they end up giving this money back. The state's novel $62 million relief fund for Black Oregonians will stop allocating grants and deposits its remaining $8.8 million with the federal court, while legal challenges against it continue. The Oregon CARES Fund agreed to deposit its remaining monies with the court Thursday after plaintiffs. Man, they just popped me with all kind of silly ads. Where was I at? This is New York Times too. No, it's not. I should have pulled up the Times ad. But anyway, this thing got shut down. They prompted the Oregon CARES Fund to offer to deposit the remaining $8.8 million, with the courts effectively shutting down the fund, at least for now. Lawyers for the contingent, a nonprofit administrating the Oregon CARES Fund, said Thursday that about 7,000 applicants for grants remain pending. Those applications will remain on hold as the case moves forward. This was eventually shut down. So Oregon, you know, tried to do what it felt was doing was right. It set aside some of the money that it got from the federal government, and it wanted to allocate those funds to its Black residents because, as we know, we were getting shut out of a lot of that assistance that Oregon had for us. But because it was race-based, it ended up getting shut down. It got found unconstitutional, and they ended up having to give that money back to the state. That was the first time, and that was real quiet. That wasn't nothing that was really loud, but there was a few Latinos, and I think like a white or an Asian person who shut that thing down. And they're like, nah, man, I can't get no money to no Black people. We don't get no money. That's unconstitutional. That's racist, right? And this is the same argument you hear people like Candace Owens say, right? When they use racist, they don't mean racist in its historical context like we use it. They mean like, no, this is racist towards everybody else except for the people that have been put in the most dire positions because of American racism and history, right? Their racism is reverse racism, but they're using it to get things shut down because people keep trying to do race-based policies. I'm gonna bring up, and it's strange because everybody like defines this as Black farmers, but it really wasn't even Black farmers when you get into the suit. It was POC. But somehow Black farmers have since championed this thing and made it all about them. So I'll just get into a little bit of this. This person right here, this is John Boy Jr. He's the president and he's also the main plaintiff in their counter lawsuit. So farmers of color plan to appeal a recent federal court judge ruling, which they say is a continuation of Jim Crow and erases their commitment to the rights, the historical wrongs against them. So they use Jim Crow. So, there's only one person, it was only one group of people that Jim Crow was aimed against, right? There was some collateral damage, but anyway, 6 months ago, John Boy Jr., Carol Boyd, Lester Bonner, and Princess Williams filed a class action lawsuit against the U.S. government, including the United States Department of Agriculture. The farmers allege the government broke its promise when it failed to pay the eligible debt for farmers of color because Congress repealed a $4 billion debt relief program for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, which includes Black, Native Americans, Hispanic, and Asian Americans and Asian communities, it said. Now, the problem was that when it came to Jim Crow, Native Americans, Hispanics, and Asian communities wasn't the one that was targeted against. It wasn't the one that it was impacted. So it's odd to me that they would take on this challenge and be the ones that filed this lawsuit and try to get this lawsuit through, when nobody else is doing it, no other suit. Here's the lawsuit that they're filing. And I'm just going to go down just to show you guys a few things. I'm going to show you the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. See, the parties in the lawsuit. Nobody else is doing this. It's just us, right? So you got John Boyd Jr., that was a Black man you just seen, is a Black farmer in the SDF as defined. That was a Black man. And then the other is Carol Boyd, is a Native American farmer in the SDF. So you got a Black man, a Native American woman who I believe may be, I'm sorry, but I think she may be a pretendian and just going by that Native American title because she's related to him. Lester Bonner, Princess Williams is a Black farmer. Lester Bonner is a Black farmer, and the defendants is the U.S. government. So this money was intended to go to POC, and it was intended to go to POC because what they say is the historical harms of Jim Crow and everything else that's happening. But when they didn't get the money, you see the Black farmers take the reins of this, and now they're wanting to champion money for everybody else. Understand, and they're not going to win because it's unconstitutional. We just broke down why race-based and race consciousness doesn't work. But let's just say in some parallel universe, if they would win, they would align with the same people that just got the money for Black people in Oregon shut down. Those was Asians and Latinos that said, no, ain't no Black people getting no money in here. Like that's who the whites are using the new Americans to do their dirty work like they always did. I'm not even gonna go into the history, but like they always did. So when you think about, what Edward Bloom is doing with students for fair administration, how they challenge affirmative action. And, here at BTP and USADOF, we understand that we can use this as a moment to do a correct course because affirmative action wasn't being used right in the first place. But even when you get down to like what essentially happened is that whites use, except for Abigail Fisher at Texas University, whites use Asians and Latinos to end affirmative action, right? It was Asians and Latinos that came out in California a few elections ago and said, nah, we don't do affirmative action here and we not going to get it back on the measures, right? We're past affirmative action. We didn't already use it for what we could use it for. And affirmative action is just done. And it's sad to see that when we advocate for ourselves, we include everybody else. Nobody includes us. We include everybody else, right? Let me pull up Bloom's website so y'all can just see how Bloom them ain't playing, man. Like they got a conservative Supreme Court. The understanding of the Constitution is on their side, and they taking everything down, right? They taking everything down. I don't know why people keep playing. This is Bloom's site. This is his organization. Project on Fair Representation. Funded in 2005, the Project on Fair Representation is a not-for-profit legal defense foundation that is designed to support litigations that challenge racial and ethnic classification and preference in state and federal courts. And introduction. The mission of the Project on Fair Representation is to facilitate pro bono legal representation to political subdivisions and individuals that wish to challenge the government distinctions and preferences made on the basis of race and ethnicity. POFR will devote all of its efforts to influencing jurisprudence, public policy, and public attitudes regarding race and ethnicity in 6 arenas: voting, education, contracting, employment, racial quotas, and last, racial reparations, challenging racial discriminatory reparations plans, right? And so far, they're 100%. So far, they're undefeated. So far, like, this group is undefeated, and they're taking everything down. So when I talk about, what happened in Oregon, it was really POC, but somehow black people keep getting at the helm. And I know why black people keep getting at the helm, because it's our history. Everybody cloaks themselves in our history because they don't have a history here. You just got to America. What you mean, Jim Crow? Like, how many of y'all was impacted by Jim Crow? Come on, man. We know what the data says. It just keeps being us. It keeps being us. But if we win, then everybody wins. So you got Oregon. You got this lady's name is Arian Simone. This is her Instagram. This is Arian Simone. And runs this Fearless Foundation, right? She runs this, and I don't know why. She must be a single lady, and she's just showing off, probably trying to get chose, I'm assuming. But anyway, so she runs this Fearless Fund. You can see images of this Fearless Fund. It's always some black people with all this black visualizations, right? And when she's talking, it's like black, black, black. And, they had this challenge by Edward Bloom, by the organization that I just showed, right? And they had a very quick win. And she was just all on Instagram bragging about it. Like, I got this fund. And I'm going to break down the fund for y'all in a minute. I got this fund, and we giving money to black women because we know when it comes to black women, venture capitalists gives to black women the least. So she's doing this fund, and she's saying she's giving money to black women, and she got challenged. And immediately, the Georgia federal judge rejects conservative activist groups' efforts to hog grant funding. So she just ran to Twitter like, they can't stop us, black woman power, blah, 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 blah. But immediately after that, she got put on pause. They said, hey, you can't give no money out right now, right? We got to see what's going on with your fund. Now, like I said again, like, this is problematic. I'm going to pull this article up, and I'm going to read this one because this woman is a problem. And I'm going to tell you why when I get into her fund. So appeals court pauses Atlanta VC fund grant for black women. Conservative group sued the Fearless Fund, alleging racial discrimination for helping black female founders. That's what they say. Alleging racial discrimination for helping black female founders. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta on Saturday ordered Atlanta-based venture capitalist firm Fearless Fund to pause grants applications supporting black female founders while a lawsuit alleging racial discrimination works its way through the court. The ruling is the first legal win for the nonprofit American Alliance for Equal Rights, a conservative group started by Edward Bloom, a key activist in the successful challenges of affirmative action in the college admissions. The Alliance sued Fearless in early August, alleging their $20,000 small business grant program was racially discriminatory because it was only for black women. Now, that's what they say. But guess what? They're not right. But I know why they said that, because they got the information from her. she's been running around everywhere using our history and our legacy to get resources from these companies. And then she takes the resources and guess what? She gives them to everybody. This is her being interviewed by CBS.
Fight over diversity in business. It involves the Fearless Fund, which is the first venture capital fund built by women of color for women of color. According to the fund, just 0.39% of venture capital funding goes to businesses started by women of color. The Fearless Fund was founded in 2019 to help close that gap by providing funding and support to Black female founders.
But now it's facing a lawsuit by the American Alliance for Equal Rights. That's a group founded by the conservative activist who was behind the effort to end affirmative action in college admissions. Now, this suit alleges that the fund's Fearless Strivers Grant Contest is, quote, their words, a racially discriminatory program that blatantly violates the Civil Rights Act's guarantee of race neutrality because its $20,000 grant prizes are only open to Black women. We are joined now by Fearless Fund co-founder and CEO. Her name is Arian Simone. This is her first interview since the lawsuit was filed against her company. Good morning to you, Arian Simone. Good to have you here at the table.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So what was your first thought when you heard that you and your partners were being sued?
My initial thought, I didn't think that this was real, but once I realized that it was, I was aware that it was definitely an attack to dismantle and address our economic freedom as people of color. But I knew the moment it happened that we would continue to do the amazing work that we do.
You didn't think it was real? What did you think it was? What did you think?
When the emails came through, I honestly thought it was ChatGPT.
You did?
Yeah.
You thought maybe you were being punked sometime.
Yes.
So now that you know that it is real, what's your response? What are you all planning to do?
Oh, our response is simple. We plan to continue to do the work that we do for women of color. As you stated before, women of color are the most founded entrepreneurial demographic. They are just the least funded.
Why do you think that is? I mean, when I read the number, Arian, I thought I was reading it wrong because the number was so low. Less than 1%.
Yes, fraction of a percent.
Yes.
I think even beyond racism and sexism, there is something called proximity. The investors in the venture capital field, 92% of them are white male. I'm a strong believer that if we can diversify the investors, we can diversify the investments.
Now, we mentioned that number, 0.39%, and some may listen and say, well, that's something. But according to the fund in 2022, capital firms deployed $288 billion. So that fraction of 1%, it doesn't make sense when it comes to Black women being funded. I never really understood how someone who had a head start in the race would look at those behind them and try to trip them up. What is your message to those that are looking to trip you up?
Oh, our message is clear. Our corporate partners stand by us. MasterCard, Bank of America, Ally Bank, JP Morgan Chase, and many others.
What have you heard from them?
Oh, we've been in touch with all of our investors. They stand by their DEI programs. They stand by their commitments that they've made post-George Floyd to the Black community. They are in agreement with the work that they have done and the work they are doing with us.
Arian, what do you, however admirable what do you say to people who say, look, however admirable your goal, however necessary the work you're doing, the law is just not on your side. The law says racial discrimination is bad in all contexts.
And then people argue it still is not fair.
Well, it's definitely, I would say, unfortunate that things can be twisted. I can't get into the details of the lawsuit, but what I can say that certain laws were definitely put in place to offer economic freedom for people of color, and somehow things can be getting misconstrued.
What are you hearing? Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say that the part of the reason why this conservative activist Edward Bloom is pursuing this is because he just won this big affirmative action case. Yes. In which he got a ruling from the Chief Justice, written by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in which he says eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. This kind of program that you have, quote, demeans the dignity and worth of a person to be judged by ancestry instead of merit.
Well, the problem is this program wouldn't even exist if there wasn't a need for it. The reason why the program exists is due to the racial disparities that exist in venture capital.
What are you hearing, or what have you done for the businesses? What do the businesses say that you've invested in so far? Because, Arian, when I heard $20,000, I went, well, that may not seem like a lot of money, but it can be a game changer, can it not, for some of these
A great
female
launch
business.
pad.
Yes.
Most definitely. At our foundation, we have awarded over 356 grants, sizes between $10,000 and $20,000. And yes, that's definitely a game changer. It helps with cash flow management, it helps with product creation, it can launch job creation, and much more. But in addition to our grants, we are also investors at our Fearless Fund, our investment vehicle. We have deployed over $26.5 million, invested in 41 companies. Average check sizes between $500,000 and $1.2 million. Most definitely, this capital is making an impact.
Too bad you're not prepared with the receipts. Your company
She
does.
got the receipts.
Yeah, I see.
And
it's more than just black women, isn't it? Just
That is correct.
More
We
than
invest
just
in
black
women of color. So we have Latina founders, Asian founders, yes.
And it's not just financial assistance. There's also tools that you give. So what?
I'm gonna stop there right there. Everybody uses our history when it's time to anchor themselves into some type of benefits, right? Look at this. Look at this median income household by the United States. I'm gonna get back to her company. We're gonna dig in a little bit deeper. Indian Americans have the highest income. Now, when it comes to wealth, we know whites is at top, right? And it's kind of hard to really get these other groups wealth positionality because they have allegiance to more than one country, and a lot of times they're citizens of more than one country, right? So you may think they're not doing so well here, but then you understand they own homes and properties and things back in their homeland. But anyway, back to it. Indian Americans is at the top, $100,000. Filipino Americans, 83. Taiwanese, 82. She's saying all of these groups can come and get money. In the middle, you see white Americans, right? Then Korean American, Indonesian. You see the average American at 56. Below the average American, you see Thais, Bangladesh, Nepali, Hispanic, Latino, and then very last is African Americans. And notice that there's no just like Nigerians, South Africans. There's nobody from the African continent there. So they're in that African American bolstering up our numbers. See, if you was to disaggregate American freedmen from all the other Black Americans, then you would really see how bad we do when it comes to median household wealth. You will see how bad we do when it comes to the money. So anyway, that's that. Back to her program, right? Back to her program. Because this woman, and everybody does this. So here's how you can donate to her thing. And so it's not just these big financial institutions, remember what she said. This money came off the back of the commitment that these companies made because of the death of George Floyd. And just like BLM, she took this money and she's going to give it to women. She's going to exclude Black men, American freedmen men out of the picture, take Black women, and then just take all women and say women of color, right? But I'm going to show you how this is greater than just women of color. So she'll take a donation from anybody. She'll take a donation. It's just, everything when you see this, all the visuals is Black. It's just all have some symbolism of Black people, right? When you look at these names, Sherry Lumpkin, Latrice Brown, Monica Copeland, these are Black women, right? That's donating their dollars because they're thinking, yeah, we're helping out women, not understanding that you come from a group, not just a group of women, but a group of people that have been anchored to the bottom in this country. Anchored to the bottom, all right? Let me get this off the screen because let me show y'all who this money is going to. See, it always starts with us when they want to tell a story, but then it goes to everybody else when it's time to disperse those benefits. This is her website. You see the Woman of Color grant, right? And then you come down here. Here are 2023. This is the 20K, right? She talked about women having $20,000 grants and then $10,000 grant. So let's look at some. Can y'all see this? Can y'all see that well? Because I want y'all to see this. This is the people who got the $20,000 grants. This is a $20,000 grant. Look at these people. Aisha Warji, Ashiitu Dozie, Alice Kim, Angela Sisson. And you can even look at the name of their companies, right? These people are not. I see one person so far that may be one of us, right? You got a few women, but this was because George Floyd death, the venture capitalists that said we're going to pledge to give you guys some money dealing with the white supremacy racism that you've been dealing with in this country. This woman jumps out in front of it, takes the money, and just spreads it all around to a whole bunch of different women. And what you see from this, it barely even goes to our women. Evelyn Flores, I don't even know how to pronounce this woman's name. Her business is the Buttery Bake Shop. You know, like, look at these are the 20,000 grant winners. These are the $20,000 grant winners. Look at these women. These are not our women. See, it starts with us. It starts with Jim Crow, and it starts with the badges of slavery, and it starts with everything that happened to us. But then when you tell that narrative and you get companies to say, you know what, you're right. We are.
No, I just want to say, and the crazy thing about it is, based on that Supreme Court ruling, they're saying that the way to do this thing is to make it exclusive for our people, make it exclusively for those people who are the American freedmen.
Notice he dodged that question, though, when he brought up the Supreme Court ruling and what the Supreme Court said was constitutional or unconstitutional. She just dodged that. Well, I feel, here go the 10K. Here go the 10K grantees. Amanat Anan. These are Indian women. These women come from the community that has the highest income in America, right?
Hey,
Overrepresented at the top.
And pull up that one article when you are ready to transition. The one I sent.
Look. So basically, let me jump in real quick. Basically, what's happening?
Hold on.
Right, and
one thing, not him. So the 20K is these people. You see this? The 20K. We overrepresented. So, like, she ain't even looking out for her own. Like, where's the Black Sisterhood code? So the black women get 10K. Everybody else get the 20K. But go ahead.
No, that's crazy, because you see some black women in the 10K, right? And we don't even know if they're free, freedmen sisters, right? But when I remember when Biden first put his platform together, and we was given a breakdown on Be the Power of his platform. And it was a theme I noticed after that, is that they use our plight in the headline, but in the body of the text, it reads people of color. And now we have DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kamala Harris just launched some new program. The headline situates American freedmen and our plight, our struggles, etc. Matter of fact, the opening line of the body of the text may root itself in our strife, our plight, fight, and struggle. But then the more you read, it starts to water down into black people and people of color. Stacey Abrams, when in her last campaign, she did this fake outreach program that she had somebody draft up real quick that said she was going to target black men for, business investment in Georgia and all of these different things. So when you read the headline, again, it's rooted in our plight, our fight, our struggle. But when you get into the body of it, it starts talking about giving money to all Georgians. And the only thing it mentioned about black men, it wasn't even black men. It was black little boys being overrepresented in school suspensions. And that was it. It was no plan. And so I just want to say the fact that we're here and the fact that we're doing what we're doing right now, it is really, really having an effect. And these people are listening. And I'm glad, I just got to say, I'm glad that Bloom and his team are challenging these people, not because he's a white supremacist, is the devil, we know that, but because these people have been stealing from us. They've been stealing our story. They've been stealing our energy. They've been stealing from our ancestors. that they're stealing from our ancestors so that they could give money to other people, groups of people who already have money. Most of these women look like they just double dipping. So, hey, it's like they call each other, be like, hey, oh, we got another black firm over here, y'all. Call up Miss Singh and the rest of the Asian crew, and then we're gonna go over there. We're gonna double dip. We're gonna set up a new nonprofit, and this seems to be the pattern. While our people get nothing. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's very important, this work that we're doing and highlighting this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all saw this news, but Apple was recently prosecuted and agreed to a settlement by the U.S. Department of Justice for discrimination against U.S. citizens. So they basically violated the 14th Amendment and the protection that the 14th Amendment has against the discrimination based on nationality or citizenship. Usually when people think of that, they think of being discriminated against based on not being a citizen. But in this case, citizens were the ones discriminated against for the favor of immigrants. So a lot of people that may not be familiar, go ahead.
Does it say who brought the lawsuit? Or
U.S.
did the
Department
government?
of Justice.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, basically DOJ, because, and I'm not sure the origin, like who, but this is a really long standing practice, especially in the tech space. What they would do is, obviously when you can bring somebody from a foreign country, you don't have to, they'll work for cheaper. What people that come over at H-1B on an H-1B visa, basically it's a visa that allows you to come and work certain high-paying jobs or tech. People use it in the tech space, like all these big tech Silicon Valley companies. And what they want to do is they want to hire people to come from India primarily. I want to say, like, out of all the H-1B visas, I want to say India. This is data based on like 2019. India got 74%. China was 11%, and the next highest country was like, I think, Canada with 1.1%, something like that.
But would you say this was a case of ethnic networking?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. But the thing is, this is Apple trying to subvert American labor law protections. So what they would do is, let me just tell you one way they were doing it. In this article, it breaks down. I can't read it.
Hold on. Let me, because this is, I'm reading it as you're talking. This is horrible. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, okay, they're gonna pay the $25 million. The Justice Department in the statement said Apple did not recruit U.S. citizens or permanent residents for jobs that were eligible for a federal program allowing employers to sponsor immigrant workers for green cards in violation of a federal law that bars discrimination based on citizenship. The settlement is the largest ever for the Justice Department involving claims of discrimination based on citizenship. The agency said it requires Apple to pay $6.75 million in civil penalties and $18.25. Man, these ads is crazy. $18.25 million to an unspecified number of affected workers. Apple in the statement said it had unintentionally not been following the DOJ standard. You gotta be kidding me. We have implemented a robust remediation plan to comply with the requirements of various government agencies as we continue to hire American workers and grow in the U.S. So this grant was given to them. This was federal dollars. This is tax, this is money that comes from the federal government, but it's also some taxpayers' money. And they was taking this money and they weren't even hiring U.S. citizens. They were sponsoring immigrants. They were sponsoring immigrants in. You know what? I bet most of those jobs weren't even people that lived on U.S. soil. I bet a lot of those jobs they just contracted out through remote workers. They were trying to sponsor people's green cards through these jobs. It's horrible, man. That's horrible. everywhere you look, you know, and Naheem, y'all had went over this in y'all space, but you know, this is just really, I just want to kind of pound this into people's head about some of the oral arguments that was happening. Naheem them had went over there, but this is a New York Times article question, the hard question of affirmative action in slavery.
Hold on, real quick, Ibrahim.
Yeah.
There's one important detail.
Yeah. My fault.
That was left out. So, you know, we were back at the hiring line, and we went through that, and we were reading examples from that book that Roy Beck put out, talking about how there were times where, like, they will have the job interview that where it'll be one line for Spanish speakers and one line for English speakers, and the job interview will be conducted in Spanish. You know, stuff like that. The job will be advertised in the newspaper in Spanish. So Apple, we think about that on the low end, like, you know, for some of your low skill work. But Apple was doing it on a higher level. So what they would do is they would advertise through this special program those jobs, and the people that will be the H-1B visa workers would see the job and be able to apply for the job online. But citizens, it wouldn't even be online for you to find out about it. If you found out about it, you would have to apply on paper and send it in the mail. In 2023, who in the world is doing that? So I mean, it was clear that they were trying to avoid citizens even being able to see the jobs and apply.
So that's how you get to the top and we stay on the bottom. You got a pipeline from a developing nation to one of the most robust, wealthiest companies in the world. And you get to come over and work, even if you work for, you know, what we would consider, say like an American citizen would maybe get 120 and you come over and you get 70. Well, how much is 70? First, 70 is greater than, you know, most people get paid in America, not for that job, but just for a typical job in America. And then how much greater is that for what you would get paid in your own country? So you get to come on and get ballooned straight to the top. And this is what you're starting off at. You starting off with this. That's and when we say like these jobs should go to us and we should create some type of institution where, you know, we could insulate this and have pipelines to success, people call it xenophobic. How much were they paying those people they hired? I'm sure they were suppressing wages. But not at the amount that people wouldn't be dying to come over here and get those jobs. I'm pretty sure they got really acclimated into America when they took those jobs. I'm sure a lot of people in our community would love to have those jobs for those suppressed wages. And they know because we citizens, we're going to advocate to get what's owed to us. Right? You're going to ask your employees like, man, what you making? Oh, man, they paying me $30,000 less. I need to go talk to somebody. Or I'm going to be talking to the federal government. This is something that Naheem and Ali went over, the hard question of affirmative action in slavery. And, you know, this just came from some of the oral arguments at the Supreme Court. And let me get down. So 5 hours of oral arguments on 2 affirmative action cases in October mostly fit this pattern. But about 3 hours into the session, Justice Brett Kavanaugh asked a less typical question. It involved slavery, and it raised an inconvenient issue for Kavanaugh's fellow conservative. So today, a benefit to descendants of slaves would not be race-based, correct? Kavanaugh said to Cameron Norris, a lawyer arguing for the end of race-based affirmative action. Norris seemed caught off guard. I think that's incorrect, Justice Kavanaugh, he said. Kavanaugh then noted that Norris had already acknowledged that the post-Civil War benefits, that's the 1866 Civil Rights Act and all that other stuff, the Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Bank, all of that stuff that the government created, right? That the post-Civil War benefits that formerly enslaved people received from the federal government were not race-based. Those benefits was based on their status as having been enslaved, not their skin color, right? You was enslaved and then you became free. Even if you was born free, you still carried the stain of slavery. You could be snatched and taken down into the South and put into slavery, right? So you still had that stain of slavery on you, which we still have. If that's correct, then the benefit for descendants of former slaves is also not race-based, Kavanaugh said. You can make other arguments if you want about that, but it does not seem to be race-based, right? And then Gorsuch like moved the conversation on, right? But everybody's coming back to, you can't do race-based, you can't do race-based, you can't do race-based, you can't do race-conscious. I'm sorry, but I got to bring this up. So there was a space that our brother Prom was hosting. And towards the end of the space, Camilla Moore comes into the space. And this, where is this at? Don't tell me. Where is this? She comes into the space. I think it's this one. And she says this. I want y'all to understand what she says. And, we're going to kind of get into it, but there's no red herrings in this. We are about the upliftment of our people. If you're right, you're right. And if you're incorrect, you're just incorrect.
On a federal level, and I said this since the last task force meeting, which conveniently was the day that, the Supreme Court ruled what it ruled with the affirmative action case, where under the federal law, the remedial justification is still good law. So under federal law, you can have race-conscious governmental policies. It could be perfectly constitutional. So under the national reparations movement, technically, you can have a perfectly constitutional reparative justice policy under the remedial justification exception. Let's take California, though. We have Proposition 209 that bans broadly the proposition, since it was a ballot initiative. It bans broadly any race-based or race-conscious policies. It doesn't leave any exception for remedying any past discrimination. And so we have to go with a race-neutral standard in California, actually. So all we have is Freedmen, actually, to make this shit work. People aren't getting my full position here. We have to go with Freedmen because Proposition 209 broadly bans race-conscious and race-based governmental policies, at least no remedial exception. So that's why you have SB 189. That's why you have SB 490 that creates the Freedmen Affairs Agency, because that's why we had to push so hard for a lineage-based standard, because we knew that any race-conscious or race-based would be dead in the water because of our unique situation. But again, being a dialectical materialist, dealing with the reality as it folds and how it comes, the Supreme Court did leave the remedial justification open. So what does that leave for the reparations landscape? Yeah, that does. I'm going to be frank. That empowers all the groups in the reparations space, to be quite honest. Yeah. It empowers the race-based people to do what they want. We're in the political phase that somebody else tweeted this the other day. We're like, it's time for us to stop arguing amongst each other and just start doing the work and to see which one is successful or not. And hopefully that they're all successful, to be quite honest. I mean, well, not the race-based, but I'm talking about, people who are for, their lineage, aspect of this thing. In other places, legislation being introduced, being vetted by governmental attorneys, and it's passing through. No one's seeing a problem with it. So yes, obviously there is merit and it's legal, and that's what, like I said, in California we have to utilize that term, and there's historical reference to that term in California, the Freedmen's Town, Colonel Allensworth. But I'm also saying, under a federal level, it is what it is. It's a new development per June 29th that there is room on a federal level, let's say for Harvard University or University of North Carolina or even the federal government, to implement affirmative action policies that take into account lineage and race, if it's nearly tailored to African Americans specifically, or Black Americans specifically, or foundational Black Americans, however you want to call it. That is a new development that is potentially constitutionally permissible. That's all the point that I'm making. That doesn't negate from the Freedmen's movement. That doesn't negate from us exercising our human right to self-determination to resurrect the freedman term and utilize it in legislation, the two are not mutually exclusive, is the point that I'm making.
But we're looking at the point. Hold on, Ian. I want to ask this question because I think this is good because you made me think of something. And salute to Ali, he changed his profile pic. But what is race conscious? Is there a definitive definition for that? Because for me, I mean, I would think that race conscious would have...
Race conscious is Darity standard. That's a practical example. I love bringing in practical examples so people aren't being boogeymans about and like fearmongers about the situation, about a debate. Race conscious standard is simply Darity standard, which many people still think should be the standard. I'm not saying it should be the standard, or people still think is the standard, right? This woman, Sexy Raw, just asked what happened to it. So that would be a practical example of a race conscious standard because it's race. You have to say you've been, on government records, Black, African American, whatever, for 10 years, and you have to trace your ancestry.
Right.
That new development under federal law that's constitutionally permissible.
The definition of race conscious policy, I was doing a quick Google search. I brought this up at the beginning of the platform. Naheem, whenever you get straight, just jump back in. A race conscious policy is a policy that's aimed to improve the conditions of racial minorities. In the United States, such policies are typically aimed at improving the status of African Americans. Many different kinds of race conscious policies exist, ranging from non-discrimination policy to strict numerical racial quotas. We went over racial quotas. We went over what Bloom them said they were challenging. Their main purpose is twofold: to compensate for past discrimination against the target race and to increase equality of opportunity. When Harvard and North Carolina was challenged, their defense was they were trying to increase opportunity for said group. Now, what we later found out is that 10% of Harvard's population were Black. 10% of that 10%, so 1% of Harvard's population was American Freedmen. So what LBJ was trying to intend with affirmative action isn't what Harvard was trying to get. It wasn't the same, right? We like that's where affirmative action has been derailed. And if you even take it a step further, when you look at corporate America and college, Title IX and all that stuff, it benefits white women first. I don't understand how you do race conscious policy. Now, towards the end, she talks about the standard was Darity standard. Now, we all know Darity standard was that on a government document, you had checked the box for Black or African American for at least 10 years on Darity's box by Darity standard. That was it was one more too, wasn't it, Josh? I know one was that you checked on a government on some type of government application for at least 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then there was
So you mean here's a lineage standard and a race standard. So it was like you have to find an ancestor that was enslaved in the United States, and then you have to find, then you have to self-identify as Black, Negro, African American, colored, or whatever.
And by his own admission, he said that somebody like Rachel Dolezal could pass the muster on his standard.
Well, let me jump back in real quick. Let me know about. Do I sound good?
You good? Okay,
cool. So, I just want to get back to the statements that Camilla made about, the remedial justification that is affirmative action, and the Supreme Court case was clear. The Supreme Court case was very, very clear. And we know that one of the things that was argued was if freedmen was a race neutral or a race conscious term. The back and forth, the volley between Kavanaugh and Norris was clear about the freedmen receiving benefits not because of their race, but because of their status. So I think, I don't know what people are going to try to do with that information, but if they try to do race-based or race-conscious anything, I believe that it's going to fail, which brings us back to the Darity point and what he's trying to do. The moment you invoke race, whether it's race-based or race-conscious, right? Race-based is direct. That's the legislation saying reparations for Black Americans in the 21st century. Race-conscious is, as Camilla said, it is the criteria to whereas a person simply would have had to identify themselves as Black for the past 10 years or 12 years prior to the onset of the reparations program, which I'm guessing many of them are probably doing right now. But either way, I think that we've already been given a remedy. And in that, we don't need to try our hand at doing something racial. I just think it like Ali always says, it's adding degrees of incline to an already uphill battle. And I just don't think that it's necessary. I actually think it's wrong advice to tell people, especially after the Supreme Court ruling and how thorough they were, especially Justice Thomas breaking down Freedman's status, and then Gorsuch like really dissecting the bureaucracy of the racial classifications that was adopted by federal directive or adopted in Federal Directive 15. So, we don't need the race conscious, race based stuff. We just don't. We don't. That court case, I just want to stress that to everybody that's listening and haven't read that Supreme Court case. We have, and it's very, very clear that you cannot do race-based or race-conscious anything. And so when you're saying like the remedial justification portion of affirmative action is still good law, it's still viable, then what makes it viable? The court just told us that the status, right? What the descendants of slaves receive benefits based on their race or based on their status. And it was based on their status. So that's all we have to stick to. And that's it.
Josh, you wanted to add to that?
I did, but I wanted to come from the case, and I don't have it in front of me. I don't have what I was going to cite in front of me. So
I just Baki ended race-based affirmative action in California, and she was saying because of that court case that they have to go with American Freedmen, they can't do anything else. But then she said because of what happened with the Student for Fair Administration versus Harvard and North Carolina, that it opened it up. And I'm like, hold up, if Baki narrowed California to where y'all can't use race-based or race conscience, y'all can only use status, then what makes it different when the Supreme Court justice, the highest court in America, says you can't do it? How does that
exactly
like, yeah, so I like, just, and I need people to understand this in this reparation advocacy space, that just because you disagree with the person's opinion doesn't mean you see them differently, right? It doesn't mean like I have an issue with Camilla or I have an issue with Darity. It's just like, no, on this one, I'm just challenging what you said, because I believe you were right when you said the ruling for Baki narrow California in a way you can pass legislation that it can't be race-based and it can't be race-conscious. And I think the same would apply for the Supreme Court after they, upended the race-based affirmative action, the same would apply. So you can't do race conscious and you can't do race-based, which means that, as much as we use Dr. Dirty's work, that, now Dr. Dirty would have to go and revise his race consciousness when it comes to qualifying for reparations or not, because, it now definitely makes it unconstitutional. But anyway, I think a lot of people heard that and they were kind of confused. Prime did try to follow up, but the question didn't get answered. I'm not saying because she eluded it, but because somebody else jumped on the space and they started breaking down what race consciousness means. I really wanted her to answer that question. But anyway, I think because of what she said, it kind of gave other people motivation to hold these spaces. And I was online one night, I was on Twitter, and like I said, I came across a space and a guy was sounding like this.
The aphrodisiac symptoms, which now perpetrates the Jericho's activation. So, do not misinterpret the chauvinistic.
Give to the United Negro Scholarship Fund, because a mind is a terrible thing to develop.
So there's this guy. Did I share that? Did y'all hear that?
Yep, I heard it. But Ibrahim, real quick, because I don't like when nobody do that when I'm about to go into my next topic. But I want to, because you put something up on the screen about lineage base. Can you just put that back up real quick? I'll try to
about
do
the
that
New
60
York
seconds.
Times.
No. That comment. About lineage base.
Got you.
All right. So it says lineage based is the only way. Race based is too broad. I want people to understand, right? Lineage, we can say that, but even that's too broad if you think about it, right? Even that can be misconstrued in some type of way. We don't want anything that's going to be used as a proxy for race. Now, we don't know if it will, but our thing is we are just going to limit how we craft this language to those those families that have freedman status and their descendants based on the definitions that were given out of the Supreme Court case. What is that? Josh Fairfield versus Lawson, I believe it is, the Supreme Court case in Connecticut in the 1800s, which what defined freedmen. And there's another case that also defines freedmen. So I just wanted to touch on that because I know that lineage base is a term that's being used in the reparation space, but the Supreme Court case is clear. And I believe that the language that we just need to stick to is status. We don't have to say lineage base or anything of that nature anymore. Those that bear the freedman status should be, that should be how we look at it.
I'm trying to be as serious as possible, and this is a serious matter, right? But me and Naheem, we interviewed a brother that was running for United States Senator of California. He was running for Kamala Harris OC, and the brother's name is Deion Jenkins. That's whose space I went into, and this is him. This is it's Deion Jenkins for President.com. All right. This is him inside of what seems to be a nickel, a quarter, maybe even a dime. In God we trust. It says reparations, United States of America, 2160. I don't know what the significance to that is, but it says latest news credited for defining reparations for blacks who descend from American slaves, 2019, the source. I ran for president in 2019 with the reparations being my main core agenda. And this is the source article. I'm going to bring this up. Right. So this brother ran for president, and I think based off what some of the conversations that's being had online, this brother is running for president again, and he believes the key to reparations is that we use strict scrutiny. Now, I'm bringing this up because, as you know, on my channel, we've covered RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign. We've covered Dr. Cornel West's presidential campaign. We haven't covered Marianne Williamson. I don't know if I'm going to cover her unless she like really gets a bump or something like that. But and we'll eventually get into Biden and Trump as we get closer to Super Tuesday. So anyway, 2020 presidential candidate Dion D. Jenkins. This is him. Fights for reparations. Democrats 2020 presidential candidate Dion D. Jenkins is a candidate for the people. He is an activist, entrepreneur, and a talented music artist. As a hip hop artist, Dion D. Jenkins uses his art as a vehicle to articulate his political and social message. Although he is the only candidate who is not a millionaire, he brings a level of authentic representation that is lacking in race. Right now, I am the only candidate. This is a quote from him. Right now, I am the only candidate who has a plan that will eliminate the racial wealth gap, states Mr. Jenkins. The focus of his platform is the reparations package for a foundation of Black Americans called Defense, Money, Land, Grants. The source sat down with Dion D. Jenkins for an in-depth interview. Guess who else sat down with Dion D. Jenkins for an in-depth interview? Me and Brother Naheem did while he was, running. I'm going to play some of this interview. This was a hard interview. So I go into the space he was having this space, and he was saying that we need to go against the grain. We need to use strict scrutiny when it comes to getting reparations, because then if they don't give it to us, then the courts will, then we can prove to everybody that America is racist. I don't think there's a doubt in my mind that anybody doesn't think that America is not racist, but a racist. The only person that's going to say that is a racist. I guess I'll play some of this interview so y'all can get a understanding of this brother who's on the ballot, and we'll just go over some of his Senate run. So during this interview, this wasn't the presidential run. We were actually interviewing him on Sonata's channel. This was for the U.S. Senate. This wasn't the presidential run. I mean, this is for the U.S. Senate. So we just had some questions to ask him. You can basically just play this from anywhere, but here we go.
I want to really concentrate locally first, get this really popping, because that's going to spread down there anyway.
Before you go, Ibrahim, when is your race? When does the election start?
Great question. Yes, sir. So if you live in the state of California, please listen up. June the 7th, 2022, we need you to come out and vote. I looked at every single candidate, every opponent that I'm running against in this primary. Not one single person mentioned reparations, even mentioned it. You have a grassroots candidate right now who have reparations as a as the centerpiece of his platform. Reparations is at the centerpiece of my platform. Come out and vote. The final two is going to move on to the general election. And if I get to the final two, it's going to explode. Because me being a hip hop artist and the type of swag that comes with that is going to be very, very beneficial for the young people. It's going to be influential for the young people. And they are going to be excited to have that type of person in power. Okay. So if we could get to the general election, I really have a shot of winning, because that's when it's going to take off. Because just me as a candidate that actually have an opportunity is going to inspire a lot of people, and they're going to be excited because I'm such of a rare commodity. I'm really something that you don't ever see, right? So because of my uniqueness alone, locks, not scared to be for my people, reparations platform at the centerpiece. That's going to, trust me, all those black people who never voted or nothing like that is going to fly to the polls. They're going to fly to the polls because it's going to be an excitement to see that. All right. So now
that's
we got to get past the primaries though. June the 7th, 2022. June the 7th, 2022. Yes, sir.
In recent years, within the last year, you actually seen several hip hop artists run for political office. We seen Willie D and Scarface run for city county councilor in Houston. I believe Willie D missed a sign up, so he had to drop out. And Scarface, he just didn't get enough votes. And you really didn't. They got a lot of publicity, right, because of their name and their acumen outside what they did in the hip hop arena, but that wasn't able to translate to votes, right? I believe Scarface lost to a teacher, and then everybody knows about Kanye West running for president. Do you think?
Let me jump in there just right quick. Let me jump in. So Kanye West wasn't a real candidate. Like he didn't even sign any paperwork. I don't believe. He was able to get. He didn't really take the steps to really run. He made an announcement after I made my announcement in 2015. He came out right after me and said that he was running, but that's a whole nother story. But he never really took his candidacy seriously. All right. So if he would have had, I think that if a guy like Kanye West really took it seriously, he would have a lot more support. And I believe that if he wasn't so, what's the word? I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say it. If he wasn't so off of the top. Now I'm off the top, but I'm off the top in the right way. Reparations, being a reparations advocate is off the top for a lot of people. But
we talked to him about a litany of things. We talked to him about what his support looked like. We talked about, at one point in time, I asked him about support. What does his support look like in California since he was running a statewide bill? At that point in time, AB 3121 was taken off. I asked him, did he have any affiliations with that? And he basically said, I reached out to somebody who was on the not the board, but somebody who was a part of the AB 3121. I made the phone call. They never made a phone call back. So that's the extent of my support to them. I guess he felt he was like Trump or Biden, right? If I call you and you don't call me back, well, that's it. That's your law. And then he said, as far as his grassroots support goes, he had some hip hop organization that was backing him. He had hundreds of bumper stickers that was on cars in the Valley. He wanted to get a billboard, but at the time that cost too much. He wasn't taking any donations at the time, but he was.
No, hold on, because he said you could download it. You could buy the mixtape. He wasn't taking no donations. He wasn't taking no donations. But if you wanted to download his mixtape 35 times at the same price, you could do that. We're gonna sell his mixtape, but no donations. No donation.
No donate. You get that mixtape though. Just to be fair, Kanye West wasn't on the ballot in all 50 states. I don't think Jenkins came on any. I can't find him on any ballots for that 2020 presidential election. We do know Kanye West was on some ballots. There's pictures of people that voted. But as far as this race that he was in, this was that 2022 U.S. senatorial for California. Alex Padilla, Democrat, ended up winning with 61%. He beat Mark Muser, who got 38.9%. That's basically all of the votes, right? So when they broke it down by candidate in the runoff that he was in, so Alex came in first place with 54%. You had Mark Muser. All right. So this is number 2. Corey D was number 3. Jonathan, number 4. Chuck came in 5th place with 3.9% of the votes. That was 266,000, a little bit over that. James, right? I think we had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 place, 17 place, 18 place, 19th place, 20th place, 21, 22, 23 with 6,936 votes. Deion Jenkins, the independent, came in somewhere in the 20s. I think I might be giving him too much credit. Let me recount this. I'm sorry. I just gotta be petty real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Michael Jordan, 23. He came in 23rd place. He beat out 1, 2, 3, 4. He beat out 4. So one person got 1 vote, so he did better than him. Another person got 7, 58, and 206. So he got almost 7,000 votes, right? In California. This is a statewide election. This is not a local election. This is statewide. All right. The winner got over 3 million in that one and went on to get over 6 million. So now, that was running as an independent. Now, if you see, it says he's running as a Republican. He's part of the Republican Party. He's running as a Republican. I would love to see him on the debate stage. I would really love to see him on the debate stage. We know we had what was the black Larry Elder? Larry Elder couldn't get on a debate stage. He couldn't get on the Republican debate stage. He was mad. He was suing the Republican Party. He was going on Breakfast Club and saying all type of stupid stuff about how he was gonna make it. Then he couldn't make it. Then his ego got involved. He tried to sue. He finally dropped out about 2 weeks ago, which is a good thing. I would love to see Deion Jenkins. He's not gonna make it, and everybody knows that. Listen, it's only one way that this Republican nomination gets like really activated and gets opened up, and that's if the DOJ prosecutes Trump or something happens with that, and Trump is ineligible to run. Then the Republican Party opens up, and a lot of people running right now is running out of money, and they got their finger crossed that something is going to happen in the criminal justice system real soon to Trump. Because if it doesn't happen, Trump is going to win that Republican nomination by a landslide and maybe even slide right into the presidential seat extremely easy. So that's our brother Deion Jenkins, and Deion Jenkins believes that he can get, if he becomes president, he'll enact reparations. I mean, all we need to do is get behind him. Now, he has learned his lesson from running for office last time, because this time, if you look on his page, he's actually taking donations this time. So let's check his Deion for President page out right now. Here we go. Deion D. Jenkins for President 2024, running for president. Will sign an executive order for reparations for Black Americans who descend from the United States of slavery. So he still has race in there, right? And you got his illustrations up. Defense, money, land, grants is a reparations package that I, Deion D. Jenkins, constructed in 2018 in regards to the 4 elements of reparations. Reparations has 4 elements, and Black Americans who descend from United States slaves cannot get true repair without acknowledging the 4 elements of reparations. For more information, click on the link. And we see about this policy. Let's get a reparations candidate on the second RNC debate stage. Well, he missed that. be a force for good. The RNC is requiring a total of 50,000 donors and 3% to qualify. Well, we know that. Put your money where your mouth is. So he is taking money this time, working on election day. And he does want to build a team. I wonder if he has a campaign manager as of yet. When y'all see him and he have honed them spaces and he's sounding like Oswald Bates, as in if he has a campaign manager. I see there's a part where you could sign up and volunteer. You know what I don't see? I don't see no platform. Where's the platform at? Where's the place? It's just reparate. Oh, here we go. Oh man, who wrote this? Ain't no. Come on, man. You supposed to bullet point this stuff. You got Zuckerberg in there. What do you say about Zuckerberg? The same type set aside that are given to Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk should also be given to the Dante Johnsons, Antonio Jenkins, and Jamal Thompson. We need the government to give us.
Those his cousins.
Hold on. We need the government to give us bank bailouts also. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, y'all. This is I just seen Zuckerberg. I had to hone in on that. This is the platform. This is agriculture and real estate. Like, he didn't know to bullet point these things. He wrote an essay. It seems as if the topic of reparations is on the lips of many politicians who are running for the office of president of the United States, and many are unaware of the element that caused its catapult. It was only, he's giving himself, when he said, it was him. I thought it was Mama Hashtag that did all of this. It was him. It was only a few years ago when I decided to run for office myself as a grassroots hip hop organizer, throwing the majority of my income into this delusional vision that I had. My vision was simple: transform any platform that I had as a grassroots hip hop organizer into a platform for a presidential candidacy. Listen, man, ain't nobody about that. So he lives in San Francisco, and he lived in Vallejo and in Oakland and in Fairfield and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I see another name I keyed in on. Just like my aspirations to the presidency as one of the blacks who descend from American slaves, Oprah Winfrey, Jay-Z, and Bob Johnson are more delusional for Black American life, and the aspirations of the individualistic concept of Black success is even more delusional because American wealth is controlled by the codification of white supremacy. Blacks who descend from American slaves have been sold the American dream, but are stuck as permanent underclass citizens and our willingness to get deceived by the notion of individualism garners the root. I'm not reading this stuff, man. Naeem, you got, I like, come on, man. You got to highlight this stuff, man. He wanted us to get bank bailouts. I don't want us to get bank bailouts. I want us to get grants. I don't want to see in order for us to get bailed out, that means something horrible has to happen to us. I don't want us to get bailed out. Just give me some grants. Give me some stipends. Give me some loans, and then wipe that loan away. It's this guy, man. And this is why, I mean, like, man, this is so serious, man. We can't be unserious when it comes to this stuff. When y'all hear Deion Jenkins on Twitter, when y'all see Deion Jenkins, man, tell this guy this. You can't try to activate a race-based reparations policy knowing that strict scrutiny is going to come. You can't do that. That's like, y'all ever...
Well, Ibrahim, remember, he said that we got to use strict scrutiny, because if you use it, it strictly means it's going to be for us, because he thinks that's what strict scrutiny means, that it's strictly going to be for us. And then he tried to switch it up and make it seem as if it meant something else. Like we're going to see.
I'm going to activate it. He said, yeah.
Oh, this is craziness.
But this is that interview, you know, like let me stop sharing it. That interview was crazy. I was amazed that Sarnetta kept putting his head down. I don't know if he was getting sleepy or what. And then you had the poker face on.
Yeah, well, let me say, because Sarnetta was like, when Sarnetta called me, he said, Lord Abbott, don't go in on a dude, just interview him. So Sarnetta sent me about 10 or 11 questions. So I read the questions and I'm like, yo, this dude put these questions together himself. I said, nah, I'm not asking him these. I asked him the first 2. The other 9 were erased his questions, reduced it down to about 7 more from the 9. And I asked him those questions, and I can tell those questions made him very uncomfortable because he lives in a fantasy world where he believes that by him speaking the thing that it's real. So he doesn't want to listen. He just only wants to lecture. Nothing you say to him makes sense. You could prove him wrong 1,000 ways to Sunday. Like, no, brother, 2 + 2 actually equals 4. He's like, no, I'm telling you 2 + 2 equals 5 because y'all are not looking at this new methodology of real mathematics in an applied way, right? And the vestiges of the vestibules, I mean, the vegetables. I'm just saying, you start getting into that Oswald Bates type of stuff. And there's some people that take him serious.
He was gonna swag his way up into there. He was gonna swag his way up. Like, it's me. I got the swag, and people like my swag. So, they ain't never seen nothing like me. That's why I brought up. I'm like, you don't, do you know who Willie D is? Do you know who Scarface is? These guys were like real major. Scarface is considered the greatest Southern hip hop artist in America, right? Like, a lot of people that say, like, when you talk about who's the like Jay-Z of the South, people that say Scarface, who's the best rapper from Texas, who's the best rapper from Houston. These dudes are huge, man. And he got beat by a school teacher. The school teacher came and beat him. I mean, I'm like, so like you and this guy is virtually unknown. And I'm not saying he's not a good hip hop artist or anything like that, but I don't listen to rap music like that. But I don't know who Deion Jenkins is. Maybe he ghostwrites major hits or something like that. He says he's not a millionaire, so I guess that's that. But anyway, and you can download his mixtape if you guys want to. I think it was a part of the first link that I shared with you. Google Deion for President 2020. He has a link to his mixtape on that one. He didn't put the link to his mixtape on the new one. He's taking straight cash now. But yeah, we just got to get more serious about our politics, and we got to stop doing these spaces. I think it was kind of disingenuous. I'm not going to say I think. It was disingenuous for Camilla to come into that space and say what she said without providing any type of case log to back her up. And the one example she used was actually antithetical to the point that she made at the end. The same applies for California with the Bakke case is what applies for the America with the Students for Fair Admission case. It doesn't open anything up. And if you're going to put that on Dirty, when you look at Dirty's standard, right, the being able to tie one of your ancestors to slavery and checking Black or African American for the last 10 years is race based. It's just like, it's not race conscious, it's race based. And from what I've seen, every time I looked at the definition of race conscious, it was just another way to kind of reword race based. It was still dealing with the harms and the impacts of racism, right? Not slavery, not Jim Crow, but racism. And it always has language of minority in there. And that's not what our reparations plan is doing. If you guys listen to the space that Naheem and Ali did, and you guys listen to this one, I think it'll really cement in why, not only why American Freedmen is the status, but why we need to use this going forward on the reparations plan. And like, I'll kind of end this video up by saying this, that most of our people, whether they're running for political office or not, couldn't tell you what a comprehension race reparations plan looks like, right? It couldn't tell you about, not the acknowledgement part, but we're talking about the redress and closure part. It couldn't tell you, what that would begin to look like. So I know a lot of people don't understand, why you should use status versus race. And that's what, these video essays is here to do. It's supposed to move this thing forward. And some of the rhetoric that's been happening online is taking us aback. And it's been happening with individuals that certain people really esteem. They hold these people high in this movement. And I think you have to look at everything, even this video, with a critical lens. That's why, as much as I just want to come on here and talk, I read all these articles and I put this stuff up. Part of that is because, the knowledge is in writing, but also I want people to understand that this is the sources that's being used to make the case. It's not me, right? If we were able to just make these things up, I would give people reparations now based on who I said get reparations, and you don't get reparations based on who I said. But we don't make the rules in America; we just abide by them. And the Supreme Court sets the standard for the laws of the land. So that's that. Naheem, you got any closing arguments? Any words to say?
Yes, I have put 2 links in the inbox. Obviously, we're not going to get into them now. But one of them, I'll cite both of them. The first one is the city of Richmond versus J.A. Croson Company. And it was a case in which the United States Supreme Court held that the minority set-aside program of Richmond, Virginia, which gave preference to minority business enterprises in the awarding of municipal contracts, was unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause. The court found that the city failed to identify both the need for remedial action and that other non-discriminatory remedies would be sufficient. The holding, and I'm we ain't gonna go through it, but the holding says
I just pulled it up so people could see it.
Okay, perfect. The holding says racial quotas for awarding government contracts are not justified by general statistical evidence of inequality. The city did not investigate any race-neutral methods to correct the imbalance. Like, that is the key word here. The city did not investigate any race-neutral methods to correct the imbalance. And its 30% goal did not correspond, to any actual measured injury. Strict scrutiny is warranted, and Richmond's law fails the test. So, we could go on for another 30 minutes about that alone. Obviously, we're not. But I wanted to show people that when it says the city did not investigate any race-neutral methods, and we're saying before the Supreme Court case even came out that we have the race-neutral method, and people are choosing to push a criteria that's based in race, and others are alluding to this idea that you can actually use race, I guess they're trying to say you can narrowly tailor a program to use race for the purposes of, let's just say, reparations. I think that that's sending the wrong message. The second case in this other link is Wygant versus Jackson. Now, where do I get these two
now?
Okay, definitely. Now, where do I get these 2 cases from? I get them from the testimony that Erwin Chemerinsky gave at the Reparations Task Force, where the U.S. Supreme Court has held that an employer can grant preferential treatment to racial minorities under a private, voluntary affirmative action program. Affirmative action is a concerted effort by the employee to rectify past discrimination, yada, yada, yada. So, when you start breaking this whole case down, it shows that you can't do the race-based remedies that the Supreme Court just struck down, right? It says, let me see. Applying strict scrutiny, the plurality concluded that the school board had no compelling interest in remedying, quote, societal discrimination, and suggested that prior institutional discrimination supplied the only permissible justification of, quote unquote, race-based remedies. However, even if the school board had discriminated in the past, the burden that a preferential layoff scheme imposed on innocent parties would be too great to be constitutionally acceptable. So what the court is saying here is, look, even if there was a race, if this was race-based in the past, what you did by laying off these white teachers to bring on black teachers, and I can't remember what the basis of it is. I would have to go back and look at it. I think it was something that had to do with black students thriving better under black teachers. Then what the court is saying is you can't do that. You can't do it. And if you can argue that, well, you know, in the past, if you were able to use race-based or race-conscious justification for us, you know, firing the white teachers and hiring the black teachers. Essentially, this is the same thing with any other program that's going to be exclusionary of those whom are classified as white in this country. And that's the same thing with the reparations program, is that we know that these Europeans, the white American, is going to come and say, well, this excludes us, and we're going to sue based on the fact that this is racial discrimination. But we're going to shoot back and say, well, no, this is not racial discrimination. This is based on the fact that there are a class of persons in this country who bear a specific status that this government had made promises to repair, and they never did. They kicked the can down the road for generation after generation, leading to what we have today as a wealth gap, as widespread discrimination, highest hate crimes against every year. New FBI report just came out breaking that down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to say that before we got up off it.
And one way you can't remedy that is giving resources to everybody but heterosexual white men. So that negates all of those programs, even if Bloom or one of these conservative organizations don't go after it. That's not a way to end the racial wealth gap in America. That's not, it just won't get anything done. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody for watching. And like I said, we not going at people just for the sake of going at people. Like these intellectual jousts, as you will, is good. You know, it's good for the audience to hear. It's good for, you know, those who are organizers to hear. It's good that we have these out in a respectable manner. This isn't me trying to drag anybody, but you know, our view has always been status-based. It's never been race-based. It's not race-conscious. And I think those who believe it can or could be should back that up with some case log is all I'm saying. So we're not going after anybody. This isn't about dragging anybody. This is just about getting to the facts. It seems we have much evidence to the fact that the government has been complicit in allowing and being actively involved in committing crimes against American freedmen. What are the steps now? The steps now is to, you know, the steps now is what they always been, to advocate for the group that was impacted, not for the group that looks like the group that's been impacted, or this new group that may have some similarities or maybe couldn't catch a cab, as Barack Obama said. And in order to do that, you have to get the language right. Like my brother Ali said, there are magic words when it comes to this thing, and American Freedmen is that magic word. And we believe that's why we kind of know this. That's why they argued that over and over when they was having oral arguments during the Supreme Court, during that Student for Fair Administration. We have to get the language right. And they were basically, to me, they were throwing a bone. At one point in time during the oral arguments, and I'll end on this, at one point in time, it was said that if Harvard and North Carolina would have did affirmative action based on the remedying of, I believe it was slavery, would the attorneys from SFFA challenged it, and everybody said no. Everybody said no. I couldn't, it's 200 and some pages. I couldn't find that, and I wanted to find that for this video. It's also in the LA Times op-ed written by Chemerinsky. But yeah, everybody said no. So, the blueprint, the pathway to success is there. We just got to, put our egos to the side, come together, and use what's been given to us, what works. And on that, I'll end tonight's program.
Hold on, real quick. My bad. I do want to just add to.
No, Josh.
Yeah. I just thought that's funny. I thought of Josh. When he says, "What are the steps now?" Well, when you look at the fact that as Camilla has stated, that remedial justification for affirmative action is still good law, but under the freedman status. It's not under race. So that means that affirmative action is still a thing for American freedmen. You have to draft that up as a status-based thing. When you look at the black farmers who are being denied and denied and denied, well, we know that their 13th Amendment rights are being violated. And what the 13th Amendment basically produced was the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which then becomes the language of the 14th Amendment. Well, so then if you look at what happened with Byron Allen's case, and he chose the racial route, and the courts used the but-for standard, right? Which the but-for is a hurdle. But for race, can you prove that this company is discriminatory and that it is being discriminatory towards you? Now, if you root those same arguments in freedman status, it changes the complexity of the argument completely. And as was already shown in the oral arguments, can a benefit be given to a descendant of slaves? Yes. And it would not be based on race. It would be based on status. Freedman status is the key here. And I'm hoping that everybody just understands that and starts crafting their arguments around that. It's not that because we said it. The Supreme Court, Justice Thomas just laid it out. So that's all I got, bro.
That was the point I was trying to get to at the beginning of the video. This isn't something that was crafted in BTP brains or at the USDO, United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen headquarters, where we just all came together and said, you know what, we need to create freedmen to replace this and to replace that. That was never the intent. It couldn't be the intention because it existed before us.
Exactly. That's why I don't like when people say, whether you want to call yourself freedmen or FBA or ADOS, no, don't do that. Because now you're trying to reduce it.
One last, and I know I keep saying this, but I am going to go. I seen something on the Philip Scott show. It wasn't Philip Scott, but they were talking about Black immigrants benefiting from the affirmative action and not Black Americans. And they were talking about some of the complaints that Black American Freedmen Ivy Leaguers was having. And their remedy was for American Freedmen to just go to HBCUs. And I'm like, well, who do you think is dominant there? Who do you think is the president? Who do you think is the most of the faculty member? Who do you think is a lot of the students that run the program? And if anybody has the right to go to any university in America, whether that be a PWI or a HBCU, and have that option, it should be us. And I'll add to that if I qualify to go to an Ivy League and I, get admitted into an Ivy League, going to Harvard, going to Cornell, going to Penn, going to Dartmouth, that's not like going to Howard. It's not the same. We should be represented in all universities in America. And the solution to that isn't just go to HBCU, where you might have to deal with some scolding heat in the summertime, some cold dorms in the wintertime, some roaches and things of that nature. So a lot of people is getting this thing wrong. They're just seeing it wrong. And I hope that, you know, what we can do is bring some clarity to this conversation. It can't always be just run. You know, I believe a lot of people would like to see us segregated in these spaces, or somewhere on the African continent as African immigrants come to America and replace us. That's not the solution to always leave. That's not who we are. Now, we people who fight, no, they got a right to say what they want the Black student unions to look like, what they want the Black associations to look like at the Ivy League schools, because guess what? It was their ancestors' bodies who either built or was able to sustain those schools during hard times. So now the solution ain't to run. And I just wanted to say that I seen that video and I was kind of appalled when that lady had said that. It wasn't Phil, but it was on his channel. But I was appalled when she said, well, they should just leave. You know, my daughter is a senior in high school this year, and I told her to apply for Penn. She's a pretty good student, got good grades. She don't believe she's going to get in, but I'm like, apply anyway. You got over a 4-point GPA. You know, I would be damned if somebody got there and she felt like she wasn't included because some new Black immigrants got there and they told her what Black food should be. It should be plantains and this and that. Like, get up out of here, man. And the solution ain't for me to tell her, well, baby, you should just come back home and go to Martin University, which is a small HBCU over here. And ain't no telling, you know, Harvard's endowment compared to one of these HBCUs endowment doesn't even compare. So no, the solution ain't to run. The solution is to get the language right and fight, because we're the only one who have the standing in this country that we have. And I think on that note, I'll just end this live stream, but I appreciate everybody watching. Thanks. I appreciate it very much. If you haven't, please like, share, and subscribe. And on that, peace.